It's fun, it's exciting. I'm talking about buying a piece of raw land, but most importantly, if you can buy it cheap, if you can buy it easy. I'm going to share with you how to find these properties, where the money comes from, and most importantly, the mistakes that you need to avoid that can cost you dearly when buying just a simple piece of raw land. You see, to find cheap land, you got to find a motivated seller. And how you find a motivated seller? First of all, you look at properties that's on the market for sale, and you look at the days that the property's been on the market. So if it's a piece of land, it's been on the market 6 months, 9 months, a year, I can assure you there's probably nothing wrong with the land. It's just they've been misguided and misdirected, if you will, the seller, thinking, well, maybe it's worth more than it is. Listen, at the end of the day, it's demand and supply. If nobody's bought that piece of land, then quite simply, it may not be worth what they're asking for it. So you never want to overlook a piece of property that you may see that's been on the market 6 months or a year, because that property may have a very motivated seller, which you can make an offer for 10 to 15% less than what they're actually asking for the property. And now here's another one. I need you to hang on to this one. If you're not taking notes, be sure and write this stuff down. This is very important. If a property's been on the market 3, 6, 9 months, ask the agent, if it's listed with a real estate brokerage company, ask the agent if the seller would do owner financing, seller's terms, owner financing. Because oftentimes you can buy a property and get a really good deal on it, and that money will be amortized over 15, 20 years. Now, how the money comes into place is this. You basically just say, hey, I'll give you 5% down, or hey, all I've got is $2,500. Listen, always remember this. Everything is negotiable, and the answer is no unless you ask. So if you only have $5,000 or $4,000 saved and you're thinking, man, I got to save 10%, 15%, 20% to buy a piece of land, don't hesitate to get out and drive around. Use an app called Landglide, Landguide, landglide.com. It's a very inexpensive app. You can drive around. It will show you your location on your phone, and it will also show you literally the breakout of the lots, who owns it, and the tax information on that particular property. Now look, you can't get emotionally attached. I always tell people that's a big mistake, because you'll really love the property. You get emotionally attached, and the next thing you know, you're overpaying for it, and the interest rate's high, because the way these properties are purchased, they can be very inexpensive, because the seller oftentimes, they're motivated and they're willing to do owner's terms. But when they do the owner terms, you're basically putting minimum down, but they'll financing that typically over 10, 15, 20 years. It's all negotiable. The longer the term, the more interest you're going to pay, but the lower your payment's going to be. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're going through the process. But everything is negotiable, and you don't have to have a whole lot of cash money to put down, because you see, you're not borrowing money from them. They're just basically using the land as collateral, and you're paying them on a monthly basis. Now go with me here. Don't get so happy and excited that you buy a piece of land and you don't do your due diligence. Every contract, doesn't matter if it's even written on a napkin, you just want to write this statement. I reserve the right to do an inspection, my due diligence. And your inspection on a piece of property, you want to know, is it in a flood zone, and what type of flood zone, and am I going to have flood insurance? Is it in swamp area? And bottom line is, you want to walk the property, you want to get a survey. Ask the seller if they have a recent survey. Walk the property not just during the daylight, walk it in the rain. Make sure there's no low spots or anything that you have to bring in. You also want to look for cedar trees. Cedar trees will grow on a flat rock, a big rock. And if there's rock on the property, it may not perk. And if it won't perk, then basically that's the city and the county's way of saying you can't put a septic system. If you can't put a septic system on the property because the soil is too rocky, then that land can be just about worthless. But you know, it's not just the rock in the land that hurts you with the septic system. You also have to know that if there's not city water close by, you'll have to dig a well. If you have to dig a well and you're in places like the Smoky Mountains, for example, you're in South Carolina, North Carolina, you're in Pennsylvania, you're in Tennessee, you get it. If there's a lot of rock in that soil, they're going to have to dig a well hundreds of feet deep in order to hit water, and that can be a crazy expense. So you want to know that going in, so you can say, hey, would you sell me the property? This is what I have to give you down. This is what we can negotiate on the terms. This is what the interest rate will be. But listen, I always tell people, it's not so much the cost of the money, it's the availability of the money, because it's not costing you a whole lot of money down. The seller is holding the terms and financing the property. So if they basically say, well, listen, you're buying this piece of land for me for $150,000, you got $5,000 to put down, we're basically going to carry $145,000. In other words, you're not giving it to me now, you're paying me over time. And they'll take that $145,000 and they may put a 9 or 10% interest rate on that. And that's what you're paying, and you're going to pay the bulk of that up front. But you just have to know that it gets you in the door for that property. You can make improvements on that property. That land's going to go up in value. When the land goes up in value and it's your property, it's your land, then it makes it much easier to go to a credit union or bank to get a permanent finance loan on that property, not to mention a construction loan. Now, maybe you're going to build a house, maybe you're used for hunting. It doesn't really matter, but if you're going to build on a property, you'll want to get what they call a construction perm loan. And this is where the bank will lend you money to build the house. They'll look at the land, they'll look at your floor plan of your house, your architectural drawings, everything, and they will appraise the house based on the square footage, the cost it takes to build, the comparable sales in the area, and the land itself, the value there. And they'll give it an appraised value, and they will loan you money on that. And then basically you pull draws to do the construction. Now, you can do it a couple of ways, but you have to check with your state, because some states will allow you to build your permanent residence without being a licensed contractor. Some states will not, unfortunately. If you're not a licensed contractor, then they won't let you. Some states they will. Worst case scenario, you have to have a contractor, and you can have a contractor. Now, some things you may be able to sub out. If you're in construction, you do sheetrock, you do paint, you can do a lot of that, what they call sweat equity, you know, where you work and pay it off and do the labor. But back to the bank, and they're doing and giving you draws to do the construction. There's a couple of ways to do it. You can pull it, do it yourself, or have a contractor do it all for you. Now, once you do the construction loan and the house is complete, completely finished, at that point they'll do a final appraisal on it, and they can roll that construction loan into permanent financing. That's why they call it construction perm loan. And that permanent financing basically starts at a 15 or a 30-year term, whichever you choose. I apologize, I forgot to introduce myself. A lot of you, if you've subscribed, thank you so much. I'm most appreciative of it. If you haven't, be sure and subscribe to the channel. Give me a like, give me a thumbs up. Most importantly, ask questions. I myself personally answer all the questions, and I try to answer every single comment so I can get back to you and I can share my knowledge of years and experience. I've done just about everything in real estate: bought, flipped, sold, built, you name it. I've helped thousands of people, and I only say that so you can have the confidence knowing that what you learn from me is nothing that I've read out of a book. It's actually real life experience. Now, if you're going to build a house, this is something that people really miss. If you're going to build a house, you've acted as your own contractor or not. Either way, after it's finished and complete, get a home inspection. We are all human beings, and no one is perfect. And oftentimes the subcontractors that you hire are only as good as their employees. Things do get missed. Take it from me. Simple things like having sewer lines not hooked up properly, having drain lines. Like, even though you get a frame inspection, electrical inspection, plumbing inspection, general inspection, you still want to have a third party come in, pay them $400 to $500 and have them inspect the property. Once they inspect it, they're going to give you a list of everything. And that way you know that you know that you know once you move into the house and close on it, you're not going to have any headaches. Now, what you do with the property is really important, and what I mean by that is you got to find out, are there any restrictions on the land? Is there any city restrictions, county restrictions, or restrictive covenants? In other words, is there anything been written in there in the restrictive covenants that basically say, in this property you can't put a mobile home, or in the city limits you can't put a mobile home, or on the county? You want to make sure you know that, or the road frontage is not such. You also want to make sure you're not landlocked. You want to make sure you have a right-of-way, and even if you have a right-of-way, if it's only 50 feet, for example, the city requires a 60-foot easement across the front or right-of-way. You have to know those things going in, because the last thing you want to do is to buy a piece of land. And listen, I'm not trying to scare you or horribilize anything. I just want you to make the best informed decision when it comes to buying a piece of land. You can buy some really inexpensive, and I don't really like to use the word cheap, but everybody likes a good deal, right? So at the end of the day, you just have to look and do your due diligence and make sure that what you're buying, you can do what you want to do on it, because the last thing you ever want to do is buy a piece of land and you get turned down and you can't do what you want to do on your own piece of dirt. So if you're looking at a piece of land and it fits your needs and you can do everything that you want to do with it, you also want to make sure that they're not going to put any apartment complexes, schools, churches, or any commercial facilities in or around the area unless you're okay with it. But you just have to understand that every time you buy a piece of land, every time you buy a house, anytime you buy a piece of real estate, you want to make sure, is there anything that's going to hurt or hinder the future value of that property. And listen, unfortunately, when you live on a busy street, there's not as many people that want that land, that want that house. And everything is driven by demand, not so much the supply. People say supply and demand, but you have to understand, if there's no demand, it doesn't matter about the supply. If there's no demand, the property itself is not going to go up in value. That's with anything. That's with selling a truck. Doesn't really matter. So you got to have that demand. And the same goes for if you're on a busy street, if you're around schools, you're around churches, hospitals. Any commercial dwelling will bring your home value down. It will prevent maximum value increase with raw land as well as just a simple home. But please do this for me. Once you find a piece of land, you negotiate it, you can close on it, you can buy it from the owner. You're looking at owner's terms, or you're just putting very little money down. I always tell people, don't forget to look at credit unions. Credit unions can give you some of the best deals, best rates, and the lowest money as far as putting down on the property. But one thing you'll want to do, the day that you close on the property, get an insurance policy on that land, and go immediately to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy no trespassing signs and put them out everywhere. The insurance policy will cover you in case anybody trespasses. Whether you've got signs or not, in this day and age, nothing will stop anyone from calling an attorney and saying they got hurt on your land and bring you into a court case where it costs you money, time, and stress. Believe me, it happens. It has happened. So listen, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Wayne Turner. Until next time, thank you. Be sure to give me a thumbs up, ask questions, comments, subscribe to the channel. I promise you, you will learn something new on every video.